a lot of things going on in the world. Sometimes we cannot kill those who do evil, but sometimes we can be pushed too far that we have no choice. And this is not vengeance. This is punishment. And that's right, folks. You know, I've been reviewing a lot of superheroes. Some of them who are crazy. Some of them who are classics. Some of them who don't kill. But this time I'm going to review a superhero who does kill. And always use a gun. Except this superhero, he has no superpowers, so he doesn't have any healing factor like Deadpool. And he goes by the name of the Punisher. But here's one thing I know you're going to be saying. I mean, I heard about the new Spider-Man movie, the Spider-Verse. I mean, it is true, like I said, I always hated Spider-Man. And you think I'm gonna just give in and watch that Homecoming Spider-Man movie? Or any of those Amazing Spider-Man movies? No. I just can't. There's no way I would. Although I would give Spider-Man Spider-Verse a chance, because this one focused not by Peter Parker, but Miles Morales, and also all the other Spider versions, like Spider-Gwen, Spider-Ham, and so forth. Even Pulp Spider-Man, where he's supposed to be like the... Oh no, not Pulp. Noir. He's supposed to be like a 1940s detective-like, hardball detective-like Spider-Man. I might be interested on the alternate version of Spider-Man, but not Peter Parker. And for those of you who are wondering, why do I hate Spider-Man so much? Well, after what he did in Spider-Man One More Day with Mephisto, the devil himself, it gives me a dang good reason why I hate Spider-Man so much. I mean, selling his marriage to Mephisto? Give me a freaking break. But hey, Spider-Man's not the only superhero I really hate. There is other superheroes I really don't like or don't even care much of. But the number one worst superhero I ever heard, and I think Deadpool and I agree, which I cannot say his name, so Deadpool himself is going to pop up to tell me. I mean, tell you guys. Oh, hello. This is your friendly neighborhood Deadpool. Now, the superhero that multi-voice reviewer and I really don't like, now I don't want to name names, but it rhymes with Rope Man. And what he does is he's a Japanese so-called superhero, and what he does, he takes advantage towards women. He overpowers them, dominates them, and take advantage. Now, I don't know about you, but for a guy like me, he shouldn't be a superhero. He should be a super villain. I mean, I know I'm no hero, but I'm no villain either. But this guy, he deserves a title of super villain. But I'll tell you one thing. If he ever shows up anywhere in Canada or New York, then I show him some ways that I have some hard spots too. That came out wrong. Or did it? Anywho, I guess I said my part. This is your friendly neighborhood Deadpool, ready to go kill somebody by the name of Francis. Oh, and if I ever discover the name of that Rope Man guy, I'm gonna keep teasing him and blow his cover by calling him by his real name. 'Cause that's what friends do. Yeah. Freak. Anyway, bye-bye. Maximum effort. Thank you, Deadpool. And that's true. There is worse superheroes out there. And the one he mentioned from Japan, he's way worse. But for that aside, time to get to the Punisher, shall we? And you know, I heard that Netflix has been doing a pretty good job of doing a TV series of the Punisher. And one thing I gotta say about this actor who was in The Walking Dead, yeah, that's right. This is the same actor who played the best friend to Rick in the first series. The best friend who told his wife that Rick was dead, but it turns out he was alive. I mean, he was a very gung-ho character that he ever played on The Walking Dead. And now he plays the Punisher, but he did start it out as a spin-off to Daredevil. And now they decided to make a TV series based on the comic books. So I gotta say, that's pretty awesome. It's just too bad I don't have Netflix. Still trying to convince my grandma. Anywho, so the only way I'm going to explain to you about the Punisher and how he became what he is, first off, a little history. The Punisher showed up in the Spider-Man issue 129, and it was the first appearance of the Punisher himself. But he didn't start it out as the Punisher. Nah, he was actually a hitman who thought, I mean, he started out as a villain, but until they finally realized that he's not bad as that he's appeared to be. You see, his mission, he was supposed to sent, as it turns out, that the Punisher was hired from the Jackal. And that's the Jackal right here. He's a madman who has climbing skills and has a thing for cloning. He likes to clone people. No, I don't know much about the Jackal, although he kind of makes me think of the Green Goblin. But anyway, it turns out that he figured out that Spider-Man is not a bad guy. He was being tricked. He was hired by a villain. He was hired by the villain to kill Spider-Man, but he didn't. But after all those years listening to the Daily Bugle and J. Jonah Jameson saying a lot of bull crap about Spider-Man, and that's when the Punisher showed up, and it turned out that Spider-Man wasn't a bad guy and the Jackal was the bad guy. And he was so peeved about it that he apologized and he went off on his own. And this was the first appearance of the Punisher in this comic. Oh yeah, that reminds me. Hey, Deadpool! Front and center! Yes, multi-voice reviewer? I've been noticing that you've been appearing in a lot of comic books with Spider-Man. I mean, you teaming up with the Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man. And you've been partnering up with Spider-Man more than the rest of the superheroes. So it kind of makes me wonder, Deadpool, are you sexually attracted to Spider-Man? What? No! I'm not sexually attracted to Spider-Man. No! No. Well, I wouldn't say about you, though. Well, what are you talking about? Well, I've been noticing that you wanted to dress up like Batman, and of course you always liked Batman so much. Are you sexually attracted to Batman? No, not really. I'm not sexually attracted to Spider-Man. I'm sexually attracted to Wonder Woman, but not Batman. I admire him, and I want to be like him, but I'm not attracted to him. And besides, Wonder Woman, she's fighting for her rights for me to wear satin tights. Where did that come from? Anyway, back to the review, shall we? Some of the creators liked the Punisher so much, they decided to make him become an anti-hero. And sadly, that comic book was made back in the 60s. And back in the 60s, there's that comic book legislation. I mean, thanks for the comics code and the legislation that superheroes are not allowed to kill. Stop killing. I mean, the comics code decided to make a certain law that the superheroes are not allowed to kill any bad guys. It doesn't matter how evil they are, no killing. Now, I know some of you are going to be telling me that back in the old days, Batman did kill some bad guys, and one time he did use a gun, but that was then. This is now. The comics code forbid him to kill. So, it's pretty much part of the code. But the Punisher, on the other hand, the Marvel Comics Code forbid the Punisher to be published by the Comics Code. So what they did, they secretly published Punisher comic books, and it's all in black and white, so it won't be too gory for the fans who read them. And they did an all-out story about the Punisher being a one-man army against crooks, crooked politicians and mobsters and such. And for those of you who are wondering how he became the Punisher in the first place, well, they put it in the comics. The Punisher's real name is Frank Castle, and he was Catholic, a devout Catholic, and he joined the Marines during the war. So pretty much he had his years of training in the Marine, being a soldier and such, and after the war ended, he promised his wife that he would go straight and try to live a simple life. So after coming home during the war and being happy with his wife and kids, he decided to take his wife and kids to Central Park for a picnic. And then what happened. His wife and kids came across a bunch of mobsters killing somebody in the middle of the park. And of course the mobsters, they don't want any loose ends, so what they did, they slaughtered and killed Frank Castle's family. Killed his wife and kids and left Frank Castle dead. Left him for dead. He was wounded pretty bad, but he was still alive. But after he was waiting for the justice system to do their part, they didn't do anything. His entire family died and not one mobster was sent behind bars. So, he snapped and decided to become a one-man army. Gather up all the weapons that he had during his years in the Marine, all the weapons and his fighting skills and his technique. I mean, I hear that the Marines are the baddest troops in the military. Although I prefer Army myself. If I ever join the military, I prefer the Army. But that's just me. But anyway, he decided to take revenge on those who killed his family. So he goes after the mob who was responsible for the death of his family. And after he was done with them, he was thinking about suicide. And then he stopped and discovered that there are other people who are murdered by the mob, and none of those guys never took their punishment. So therefore, he calls himself the Punisher, and he goes after, one by one, looking for a reckoning against those who do evil. He goes after murderers, rapists, mobsters, gangsters, drug dealers, slave owners, any of them that is illegal. I wish the world needs him against human trafficking. I hate that. They pee me off. Anyway, since the comics code was abolished out of Marvel, they decided to finally be owned by Marvel. And that's when they made this comic book issue, Punisher Warzone, where Frank Castle, as the Punisher, goes around and goes after the mob. And after that, the Punisher got so popular enough. And of course, he meets other characters. Like, he meets this guy, Microchip. Who he is, that he's a computer hacker who once did work with the mob, but he hated how the mob acted. So, he turned his back against him, and the Punisher found him, and he had him as an internet hacker letting him know what's going on in the world. Any crime happening, and none of the justice system ain't doing their job, it's time for the Punisher to do his part. Which, that's cool. And the Punisher was popular enough, back in the 80s, they made this movie, which sadly wasn't a good one. The Punisher, starring Dolph Lundgren. Now, for this movie, it was more like a typical cliche action movie. It had one good premise, but sadly, Dolph Lundgren decided not to wear the skull on his shirt. But that's his trademark. And one thing that was interesting is the Yakuza, the Japanese mobsters, decided to kidnap the mob's kids and put them into slavery. And the head mobster, he wants his son back. So the head of the Yakuza, who is a woman, is holding the mobster's son hostage. So now, the head mobster wants the Punisher to team up with him to deal with the Yakuza. And of course, the Punisher finally killed the Yakuza, but he knows that the mobster is going to kill him after all this, so Dolph Lundgren, as Frank Castle, shot him. And the mobster's son, he picked up the gun and pointed at Frank Castle, and he says, "If you want vengeance, you'll be more like your father, an evil man who murdered and hurt tons of people." So the kid put his gun down, and that was the end. That 80s movie was really bad. But ever since Blade and X-Men and all those other superhero movies came out, in 2004 they made this movie, The Punisher, starring Thomas Jane as the Punisher and John Travolta as the main bad guy, named Howard Saint. His story, he does money laundry from a bunch of Colombian guys who owns an illegal prostitution bar. And also, it's Howard Saint who is responsible for the death of Frank Castle's family, all because their son got killed in the crossfire during a heist that they were planning to do. Frank Castle was going undercover. But this was a good movie, and Thomas Jane did a really good job playing the Punisher. But after that movie, they decide Thomas Jane, he would love to play Frank Castle, aka the Punisher, once again, but sadly, they were planning a sequel, but they abolished it. But some of the die-hard YouTubers, they made a fan-made video, a fan-made film short called Dirty Laundry, starring Thomas Jane as Frank Castle, going in the laundromat, trying to do his laundry, and then there was crime going out in the city, so Punisher's work's never done, especially during laundry day. And then they did a reboot called Warzone the Punisher, right here. One thing I gotta say about this one is it's a lot more gorier than the original movie, and I always hear a lot of blood splat every time he fires his gun, like... It was too gory. And on this one, he deals with the bad guy who always acts like he's so good looking and such, but after he fell into a machine, it crushes all the glass bottles and such. All the glasses just scratched his face up really bad and became Jigsaw. And he also brings his psychotic brother out from the hospital. And he looks at his brother with his scarred up face and he says, "My dear brother, you're beautiful." And of course, Newman was playing Microchip, but they killed him off in that one. And of course, Jigsaw decided to route up all the gangsters in order to kill the Punisher. But the Punisher won. And after the whole deal with the Punisher of the movies was done, until the Netflix. Oh yeah, one thing I heard, on the Netflix version, it turns out that there's a character who was his best friend who now works with the mob as a hitman, and in the future series, they're going to do something to his face and make him become Jigsaw. It's like everybody becomes Jigsaw and also becomes the Punisher's #1 guy. Heck, even in the video games. Even as the video games, they use Jigsaw as the main villain. And I'm not talking about Jigsaw from the movie Saw. That'll be interesting. Frank Castle getting kidnapped and Jigsaw asking Frank Castle, "Would you like to play a game, Punisher?" And I always hated the Saw movies. Speaking of video games, there were a lot of games they made. Some of them were good, some of them were... I mean, I heard that heck, the first Punisher video game was a Nintendo game they made. Which the Nintendo game I heard was okay. But it was LJN, the company who makes the worst video games ever. And then they made a sequel, except it's on Game Boy. Imagine that being cool. And then Capcom, who does pretty much a lot of work on the Marvel stuff, deal with Sega Genesis to make this Punisher game. Until after that the Punisher movie was made, I got this. Punisher, the video game. Voiced by Thomas Jane doing the voice of the Punisher in this one. Which I had to admit, it's pretty fun. Pretty gory, but fun. Now, I don't like Grand Theft Auto video games, but this game is like Grand Theft Auto if you have another character who hates gangsters and mobsters. Now, the game itself is very violent and very gory, but the way how I play the game kind of like a car. I just hit and run. Every time there's a bad guy, I just shoot him and go to the next level. But I have a friend of mine who played this game. He likes blowing their heads off or blowing off their limbs and being more creative. Ugh. Of course, that's a part of the game, but it's not my style. I just prefer hit and run. Oh yeah, I also heard that there is another Punisher video game made after the second movie called Punisher No Mercy for PlayStation 3, but I haven't seen it. I think the game might be canceled. But in the comic book world, a lot of things have been happening to Frank Castle lately. Like there is this one Punisher comic book they did here, where the Punisher deals with this son of Wolverine, and of course this character kills Frank Castle. He uses his adamantium claw and cut him up into shreds. But the Punisher is dead, but not for long. So what they did is they put them back together with mechanical parts and therefore created Franken-Castle. It's like a Frankenstein version of the Punisher. Which I say that's kind of cool. And he did join the Howling Commandos, a group of monsters who battle against the forces of evil. Until Franken-Castle finally met the witch doctor and such, and something magical happened to him. He finally came back to normal. And he's been through a lot. I mean, and he enjoyed a lot of... I mean, he did join a couple of groups. He was with the Avengers, but I guess he was too violent to stay with the Avengers. But he did join a group called Thunderbolts, where all the red-wearing superheroes teams up. You have the Red Hulk, Jennifer Ross, Elektra, Daredevil. Heck, even Eddie Brock. He wore this symbiote where it's now red and black instead of white and black. And Deadpool is in the group too. He joined the Thunderbolts for a while in the comic book Thunderbolts. Now, when Frank Castle's not the main Punisher, sometimes there are other people who took the mantle. I mean, there are these people who they wore his shirt and took on the mantle as the Punisher. Now, don't ask me about their names, but you can look it up on Comic Vine. I just forgot to put their names in it, sadly. Another one. And of course, there are some Elseworld stories too. Unlike Deadpool, who killed the Marvel world, the Marvel universe, they did a comic book of Punisher kill the Marvel world, where he kills all the Marvel superheroes. And don't forget the Punisher versus Deadpool. Oh yeah, that. Thanks, Deadpool. And I also heard that they also did a Punisher 2099. Sorry, I didn't print out a picture of that. But on Punisher 2099, turns out that there was a guy who picked up the history of Frank Castle, so he took the skull look and become a futuristic version of the Punisher in the year 2099. And of course, do you know that Frank Castle became Ghost Rider as well? Now, he wasn't called the Ghost Rider Punisher, he was called the Cosmic Ghost Rider. Now, why I didn't mention him on my last video about who's going to take care of Thanos, well, his story is complicated. This is an Elseworld story. In this Elseworld story, imagine if Thanos won and he killed everybody on Earth, including the superheroes. Each and every superhero all dead. But surprisingly, only the Hulk survived, but he gets kidnapped. And Frank Castle, well, he also survived too, but he wanted to do whatever he can to kill Thanos. So Mephisto showed up, offered his soul to become the new Ghost Rider. But here's the problem. Being a Ghost Rider, he can't leave Earth. So he was stuck on Earth, driven himself into madness, going completely crazy. Until Colossus showed up. And Colossus, he hates Thanos. He hates Thanos more than the superheroes. So Colossus gave the Punisher cosmic ability, So now he can fly in the stars and have cosmic science fiction-like guns, and therefore the Cosmic Ghost Rider was born. Unbelievable. And he's like a mixture of what if Frank Castle becomes Ghost Rider and then mixed with the Silver Surfer. And that is the Punisher for you. Now, there were some other things involving the Punisher, but I couldn't because of time. But you have to admit, out of all the superheroes in the world, nobody ever thought of a superhero who can kick butt like that. And that's how I feel. I feel like kicking butt myself against those who do evil. Except I never joined the military, and I think I should have. Who knows? But anyway, for those of you who like my Punisher review, please leave a comment down below, hit like and subscribe. And as for me, I'm going to review a pulp hero. A mask-wearing pulp hero, and believe it or not, was the inspiration to my favorite superhero, Batman. And the pulp hero is called the Black Bat. So stay tuned. Let's kick some butt. Oh, wait a minute. Oh yeah. I got the comic book adaptation of Spider-Man the movie. And I'm going to get rid of it. Anybody want to buy it? One thing I'm going to say about this is, shut up and take my money!